Hi there, Internet. I wanted to talk today about an industry that experienced massive hype through last year, but has since seen a bear market through most of this year, and recently has had some very, very interesting developments. That industry is the solar industry. So let's take a look at what's going on at the moment. We'll start by looking at the ETF called TAN. So this is an ETF that models the solar industry. And I have spoken about this previously, but not within this context. So we can see that from the bottoms, 20th of March or so last year through to early February of this year, this ETF experienced 476% gain. Now, I think we know the reason behind this. Obviously, the world is trying to decarbonize. Solar as one part of that story. And there was anticipation that Biden would become president of the US and his policies were likely to be very friendly towards the solar industry. And so we saw this enormous gain within the period of 1 year. It's quite unusual to see this kind of gain in an ETF, a collection of companies, but that's what we saw. So after that happened, this massive climb was never going to be sustained. There needed to be some kind of a correction, and subsequently, from February through to May, nearly June, there was a correction that pushed this sector into a bear market. And so solar stocks haven't done very well through this year. But since Mayish, there's been a bit of a recovery in sentiment, especially as there are many developments around the world. I think now that the price has cooled off a little bit, people are interested in getting back into the trade because there are a number of infrastructure projects globally with huge amounts of money being thrown at decarbonizing the world. The recent development, though, is something a little bit different. So just to talk a little bit about the industry in general. So as I usually start these kinds of videos, the Wikipedia page for just about any kind of topic will give you a really good overview. And so I haven't looked at solar specifically, but photovoltaic companies. And the reason I've done this is because you can see, I wanted to highlight the prominence of China within this industry at the moment. So China has outpaced the US and many other countries in the world by investing heavily in different industries that it thinks will be prominent through the next few decades. Solar being one of these, and they've done very, very well. So well, in fact, that I think it's down here. So more than 50% of the market is owned by China. And this means that China has established such economies of scale that most other countries have now become their customers, and it's very difficult to dethrone China from this dominance that they have, this market share that they have. When we talk about, or when I talk about solar companies as potential investments, a lot of those companies, in fact, they either got started out as, or their primary product is something called solar inverters. So this is the piece of technology, the hardware that is used to take the energy that is generated through the actual panels and then convert it into a source of electricity that can be used within our power grids. So I'm not going to go through the ins and outs of exactly what these are and who the players are, but that's more or less the main components in solar. A lot of solar companies now are also getting into the storage game. So if you are generating power, you generally want to store it. Not all of it will be used as it's generated. And then some companies are doing other interesting things. For example, SolarEdge is starting to get involved in electric vehicles, not making the vehicles themselves, but helping other companies develop their electric vehicle capabilities. So China is obviously currently the leader in part of the solar industry. And in this article, it just talks about how the West almost accidentally didn't invest enough within the industry, and this led to China's dominance. So I've just highlighted some key paragraphs here. I'm not going to read them out. You can probably read them yourself. All right, so this is an interesting point. Nearly 80% of the solar panels installed here, this is the US, are from China. And even though the US has imposed some tariffs and also tax credits for those companies working in the US, China is still way ahead of the game. So China controls 64% of the polysilicon material supply worldwide. So this is the material that's used to create solar panels, amongst other things. Now, the interesting piece of news, the US was mulling over a ban on imports from China. So the stated reason for this is that it is thought that China is basically using slave labor as part of their solar industry manufacturing. So the US is using this as part of the reason that they want to potentially ban the imports from China. And this actually has now happened. All right, so as of, I think this was yesterday, the US has, it's not in this article, but the US has banned, I think, 4 of the 5 or 5 of the 6 major Chinese players, as you can see here. On top of this, the US has also announced tax credits for manufacturers within the solar industry. So they're blocking the imports that are coming from China, from a large number of companies from China, which worries me a little bit because I don't know how they're going to immediately ramp up or very quickly ramp up manufacturing capabilities to meet the demand. So that's one concern I have, and it's not clear how that demand is going to be met. But also, the US is now saying for US solar manufacturers, we're going to give you tax credits. I can't find very deep details of the structure of these tax credits, if there's any restriction on the types of companies that they would apply to. So for example, does it apply to solar inverter companies as well as manufacturers of solar panels? That's just a kind of a made-up example, but those are the kinds of details I need to understand in order to know the true impact on the solar investments in my portion of my portfolio. Just another article talking about how this is going to benefit the US companies. And you can see that, so First Solar had some really great news the other day about a factory that it plans to build, massive factory that it plans to build. And we can see that these stocks are the ones that popped yesterday on the various bits and pieces of news that I just mentioned. So again, this is just an article on the same topic. So we're going to see the details. I want to see the details of this tax credit. By the way, this is not a certainty just yet. This has been proposed. The market is very optimistic that it will be implemented, but let's see. I don't know what the timing will be like either. So I'm not going to go through all of these stocks at the moment because it would take hours to analyze them. But these are just a few of the stocks that I have been looking at over the past year. So 2 of my favorites are Canadian Solar and First Solar. I like Solar Edge, although it is more expensive than the other 2. And Enphase is another expensive play, but a good company with good growth prospects. So what we can see here is that the likes of, I think I've sorted this by sales. So Canadian Solar is the company that makes the most in terms of revenue, but has a teeny tiny market cap. If you look at this, and if you read across the various different metrics here, I guess at a bird's eye view, it seems relatively cheap. There's some negative EPS growth in the short term, but then that changes over the next 2 years. First Solar is similar. I mean, sales aren't as high and market cap isn't as low. But if reading across, you can see that growth is fairly steady through the immediate term. And then Solar Edge, expensive, Enphase, expensive. The others I haven't looked into detail. I because I consider them to be fairly expensive, and these seems to be better bets. Now, does this mean you should just be buying all and every different US listed solar stock that you can? Well, No. First of all, you need to determine which of these companies are positioned to be winners within this industry in the future. But also, even though the companies are listed in the US, they are not all US companies. So as you might have guessed, Canadian Solar, it's there in the name. It is a Canadian company. It's a global company. It is a company with massive operations, one of the biggest, but it is headquartered in Canada. And in fact, I suspect part of the negative sentiment that has existed around Canadian Solar is because of tariffs. So there are currently tariffs between the US and Canada in terms of solar products. So this has been in place for a while. It started off at 30% and it's dropped off to, I think, 18% now. And this is something that the Canada is trying to get removed. So although the current news might not directly impact Canadian Solar, what is interesting is that will the US need to have an easier relationship with Canadian Solar once they have reduced, in an attempt to reduce their reliance on Chinese companies. The other company in this list that I'm currently invested in, and I think has good prospects for the future, despite being expensive, is SolarEdge. And this is, again, it's a global company. They operate globally, but it is an Israeli company. So this news has lifted the stocks, I think because they're solar stocks and they're not Chinese companies, but just be a little bit careful there. All right, this is just a piece of news that I wanted to highlight in terms of the solar industry. It is it's been taken an absolute beating through the past 1 to 2 quarters. Prices went as low as they were back in October last year. The market obviously now feels that enough heat has been taken out of this price action and is ready to reinvest. I think that we're now seeing the beginnings of another catalyst that will drive the sector higher, and certainly certain stocks. I think companies like First Solar are very, very well positioned to benefit, and are good companies, and we're looking cheap. All right, that's it for today. Have a great week and speak to you soon.